Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to title this episode Inspiration. That's what we're going to call it.
All
I was
right.
just with Charlie offline and we were like, what are we talking about? I said, I don't know. He said, I don't know either. I said, well, it sounds like we're ready. Let's go. And if you know anything about Charlie Engle, who was kind enough to join us here today, the first time I ever heard him in a story, it was like, wow. And I was in a daze for a few hours just thinking that is inspiration at its finest. Thank you, Charlie, for joining us.
My pleasure. Well, you sparked something in my brain right away, and that is there is more preparation involved. You're in something where you allow me to prepare for something, whether it's life or an event or whatever. I get to learn more about the way I'm made. I actually am a big believer personally, though, in a lack of preparation because too often with adventure and other relationships, and a lot of times everybody's waiting for that perfect moment. Everything's got to be just right, and you got to make all the plans, and sometimes you just got to put your shoes on and throw on a backpack and go out the door and see what happens.
Yeah, you got to pull the trigger, man.
Yeah, go,
Yeah,
just go. And it's adaptation. I mean, that is your business too. It's really about, here's what you think and then you get a test from a DNA company, and you find out that some of the things you thought you knew were incorrect. Some of the things you didn't know at all. But it really is about adaptation. All of it is. You figure out which things you want to change, what you want to improve on, and then you keep going.
yep. And now what you're doing today. Some people, a lot of people here will recognize you in your work, but where you came from and adaptation being a key word here, and your background and what inspired you to change. Maybe tell us a bit of the story, the background, and how things got started for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm actually going to even start from 2 days ago, just for a very brief story, and then go back because 2 days ago, over the weekend, 3 days ago, I had my 31st celebration of being sober. So for 31 years, I've been clean and sober in my life, and that's a part of my story that those people who know me, they know that part of my story. But my way of celebrating is I ran for 31 straight hours to celebrate my 31 years of sobriety, and I do it every year. And so every year I manage to stay sober, the run gets just a little bit longer, and it's turned into this very interesting event. 250 people came out and celebrated with me, and about 25 of those stayed out for the whole 31 hours. And and again, I'm preparation. You can't prepare for that kind of thing, really. You don't know how hot it's going to be. You don't know how you're going to feel. But very often, you can just go out and try to do something hard and see what happens and do the best that you can. And so to go back in my story just briefly, I grew up in North Carolina, and I divorced parents and a weird sort of hippie upbringing. And at 17, I went to college as a very um, well accomplished high schooler. I was an overachiever, student body president, captain of a bunch of teams, and dated a few cheerleaders. And I went to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and I thought it was going to be the same way.
Yeah.
And I found out like 2 days after getting there that I was incredibly average, and there were there were like 4,000 other freshmen that had the same resume that I did. And what I found out I wasn't average at, though, was drinking. And the drinking age was 18 years old still in North Carolina at the time. And pretty quickly I just fell into this hole of drinking. And this was 1980, and cocaine was really finding a lot of traction on college campuses. And for a lot of my friends, it was no big deal. They could have a few beers, and they might even do a little bit of cocaine, which, I'm not advocating for, but like for them, they'd go to bed and they get up and go to class the next day. But for me, pretty quickly, that devolved into a very, very regular habit, and one that by the time I was a junior in college sent me packing. And it's funny, they'll ask you to leave if you don't go to any classes for an entire semester. And
That
yeah, how
that's
dare they?
admirable as your 31-hour run. I don't know
Yeah,
which one is harder.
right. How dare they do that? But and then I look, man, and I keep this part of my story short. But I as you know, I have a book, Simon and Schuster published a few years ago. It's done really well, and I've sold a gazillion audiobooks more than anything else. But I basically just tell the story of I spent 10 years doing the same shit over and over and thinking that I was going to get a different result. And that meant I would move somewhere, I would get a good job, have a new girlfriend, be the top sales guy in the country for my company, like kick ass. Addicts, by the way, we're the best salespeople on the planet, and
Right.
so we can make anybody believe anything, because that's part of our makeup, is to get people to believe that we'll never do that again, or it was just an accident, or whatever. It led me all the I went to rehab. I tried a lot of things to quit. And I was 29. I still hadn't quit, and my first son was born. And you heard me tell this story on stage, but I thought his being alive was actually going to stop me from drinking and drugging, like, because surely I'm a decent human being, and any good dad would stop that craziness for their kids. But that's not how addiction works.
Mm.
you don't you don't just make that decision and magically there it is. And for me, that's it just didn't work, and I found myself out there again living a crazy life. And I had one binge in particular at the end where I spent 6 days smoking crack and drinking and just killing myself and destroying everything I'd built. And that ended with me handcuffed on the ground outside a dumpy motel room. And that episode ended with me realizing one really important thing, and nobody was coming to save me. And I tell
Mm.
people all the time, I finally got it through my head. There was nobody else was going to save me. Like, a lot of people were going to support me if I made that first step towards saving myself. And if I would take that step wholeheartedly, without hesitation, without holding back, I would have all the support in the world. And that's what happened. And when I turned my life around, and I started running a lot, and everything started moving in the right direction.
It's funny because I met with you to look at your genome. We were at a conference and we snuck up to my hotel room, like, let's just dive, get away from the noise. And this thing just stuck out, which is your propensity towards binging and the way
Hmm.
your brain seeks reward and how you get stuck in it. And it's no surprise that your story of I was the best in class of everything, whether it was school, sports, women, all the high school stuff, and you were getting your reward and you were binging on it. You were doing it all the time. And all of a sudden it stopped. And the sense of reward was gone. And you replaced it with addiction because dopamine can go on either path, reward path or pleasure path, and it only needs one, right? And it's so no surprise. And I saw this. So my family background. I don't even know if I've talked to you about this, but abuse of substances was all around me. So I remember walking up to my uncle's home with my dad and seeing a TV fly out the window because my uncle was throwing it at my aunt. You know,
Yeah.
and like I remember, yeah, I remember seeing my uncle cooking his dinner while his stomach was burning on the stove. And just crazy random memories like that of just it being all the time, everywhere, all the time. There was a couple of guys that were addicts, a couple of guys that were bingers, but it was the abuse. And so coming out of that, it was this powerful driver in terms of wanting to be far from it, right?
Yeah.
And you had that aha moment yourself and pushed you far from it. But to get to that level of like a 6-day binge, holy cow, man.
Well, let me ask you though. I'm going to turn this around on you. So you obviously have looked at your own uh,
Yeah.
genome, your own genetics. So what does it say? What does it say about you? And I remember sitting in that room very well with you, because you really didn't know me all that well yet. And you deal with hundreds or thousands of people. So you got too many people's data in your head. So I don't, in that moment when you were telling me, because you told me first that based on what you were seeing, that you really didn't see the quote unquote addiction gene.
Yeah.
But what you did see was this propensity for binging. And
Yeah.
that was me. Like I thought you were a fortune teller instead of a DNA expert, like because that's what it felt like, because that was always me. I was never the guy that like did it all the time,
Yeah.
day after day, week after week. But when I started, I
Yeah.
could not stop. And then
Yeah.
I could stop for, I might stop for a week or a month. And it made me wonder, like, am I an alcoholic? Am I an addict? Because if I can stop, what am I? And you shed light on that. So I'm wondering, in your case, what does your panel say?
Well, I'm the opposite. I am the extreme addict, right? And
Interesting.
why? Because I have the lowest possible ability to bind dopamine. So it's very hard to experience satisfaction,
Hmm.
pleasure, or reward, either way. There's a gene called MAO that breaks down the dopamine because eventually you need to get back to normal. So the
Mhm.
receptors in my brain are not dense enough. In fact, the least possible density. So I don't feel the intensity. Second layer is this breakdown that needs to happen. I do it the fastest possible.
Mm.
And then the clearance, COMT is another gene that comes along like a broom, sweeps it up. I had the fastest possible. So
Hmm.
it's felt slim to none and it doesn't last nearly long enough. It's done before it started. And that leads to high reward seeking behavior. Like I need more, I need more, I need it again, I need it
Mm.
again. And that is addiction. Addiction is I
Yeah.
structure my day around it. It's part of my schedule. It is the central thing that everything else is planned around, right? Whereas what you're experiencing, the opposite, is you have such a high expression of dopamine, such a slow clearance that you're satisfied. Everything's good. I don't need anything. But when
Mm.
you get that elevated sense of reward in a particular flavor, the particular drink, there's the one that you really like,
Yeah.
it's like stuck because it's so hard to clear. You're stuck in that reward seeking experience. So by the time it was meant to be over, you're still in it. And then you start over again. That's kind of like the definition of binging. It just doesn't end. Something has to break it, which is getting arrested or falling
Yeah.
over, or crashing a
Yeah.
car.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and so the next part of my story. I got sober and I started to run, and I didn't just start to run.
Yeah.
I ran for the first 3 years that I was sober. I actually went to an AA meeting and I ran every day for 3 straight years without missing a day, not one day. Like for me, I am very good at committing to something. Like if I'm committed, if I say that I'm doing this thing, like I'm going to a meeting and I'm going for a run every day, no matter what is happening, I understood that those two core things were critical for my survival. Like that's how I felt. And so I did them every day without ever missing. And I ran like 35 marathons in that first 3 years. The joke that I always tell on stage is because I obviously I have that whole addiction thing under control. and and people will still today even occasionally accuse is too strong a word, but they will suggest that I have just switched addictions.
Right.
And first of all, I remind them I've never sold my car to enter a marathon, but I definitely did that back when I was doing coke. So
Yeah.
um so it is a different, and I get their point, but the first of all, the addiction part is all about darkness and not feeling anything and escaping. Whereas
Yeah.
running is actually the opposite of that. Like running is being fully present for me. It's, there's no escaping whatever the reality of the situation, whether that's physical pain, anxiety, fear, all of these things are fully present because there's nothing else hiding it. And
Yeah.
so it makes me wonder what your thoughts are on my dopamine seeking, like that part of me, and how that, I mean, we get this question all the time, and I think a lot of runners probably listen to this. So, how does that relate to my running?
Behaviorally, looking 30,000 foot view, hey, you just switched habits, right? The key difference that people aren't getting is you're binging abusive substances, like abusing your body, was rooted in pleasure.
Mm.
This is rooted in reward. They're
Yeah.
very different things. Dopamine powers both. And guess what? Your brain only needs one. Your brain is seeking satisfaction. So dopamine is this chemical that's, it's not what people think it is. It's not a pleasure chemical. It's a progress chemical. It makes us want to do more and do more, whether driven by pleasure or driven by reward. We would be sitting around doing nothing. We wouldn't have skyscrapers and airplanes if we didn't have dopamine driving us to want to
Yeah.
do things, right? So that's what it's for. And both of these things can lead to healthy outcomes, but both of them could also lead to very unhealthy outcomes.
Yeah.
Pleasure can be, I'm spending time with my family, I'm cooking, I'm whatever. Reward can be, I'm running, I'm skiing. It could also be, I don't see my family because I don't leave the office,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could
Mm-hmm.
also be that I steal from people because I need to win in my business,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, either a tool, just like we say about the internet, it could be good or bad, depends who's using it,
Well,
so
I look, I also, when I think about you and me, I mean, I always say to people that I spent those 3 years running every day. And I think what I was really trying to do was, which of course I know this is impossible. I was trying to beat the addict out of me. Like I literally was trying to surgically remove that guy from my life because I thought he was trying to kill me.
yeah.
And so I was trying to kill him back. And so what I really learned in those 3 years though was that my propensity towards obsessive behavior or binging is actually like a superpower. And same for you and your genetics. And if we can take that energy and that power and point it towards the things that we really want to accomplish, that's when shit gets done. Because I mean, I wouldn't trade my addictive nature now for anything because I think it's actually the part of me that makes me good at stuff.
What you just said is exactly what I figured out unintentionally after dealing with those hundreds of people you talked about and looking at their mood and behavior in their brain. And in everything else genetic, it's like, here's your genes, here's your problem. Now, here's either the supplement you need to take or here's the habit you need to remove. You don't detoxify properly. Take this pill that helps you detoxify and don't breathe in chemicals. So that's kind of how we deal with most systems of the body. Aha moment happened to me for one day, which is when it comes to everything about the brain, it's not just take this supplement and remove the bad. I kept seeing that the same person that has a genomic profile would be struggling or would be thriving. So it wasn't bad news or good news, it was a context thing. And you are wired for greatness. I am wired for entrepreneurial spirit and this reward seeking behavior. But the context and what you're doing and who you are and what job you have, etc., is going to dictate the outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So the same person that has, for example, a serotonin dysregulation, that means that they're kind of hypersensitive to stimulus, right? Their brain notices everything. That could lead to words like ADHD, irritable, frustrated, because they're working on a team, or they're working in a building with too much construction or whatever. It could also lead to words like, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, because I see every little detail and I'm so good at catching things that people didn't catch. Right.
Yeah.
So that context shift of working on a construction crew versus working as an accountant, as a forensic auditor, very different outcomes from the same neural wiring. So we are all wired with our innate superpowers when it comes to this. And the ones of us that aren't feeling well is because we're in the wrong place, wrong context. You're not doing the thing you're wired for.
What is the earliest? I'm sorry, I feel like I've totally taken over your podcast. But what is the earliest age that you test people, generally speaking? Is there a rule of thumb? Does it matter? Like if you did the genetic test for a 1-year-old, is there going to be any difference at that age from a 10-year-old to a 20-year-old?
You're born and you die with the same genes. They don't change.
Okay.
So what changes is, again, your context, which
Yeah.
means this genetic code, this blueprint you have, those are the cards you've been dealt. So now, based on what's going on, you just have different questions to ask, right? A kid is like, what course should I take? What sport should I be in? a menopausal woman is like, how do I not get hot flashes? Right? It's just a different problem you're trying to solve. And so, to your point, my belief is as soon as you're born, you're tested
Yeah.
because now your parents have this instruction manual. And guess what? I done it with my 3 kids,
Yeah.
and I know how they function differently. Even just the relationship between me and our eldest, right?
Yeah.
We think very differently. And so, what would have happened if constant frustration and disappointment, like, why aren't you doing this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you? Why don't you? Why don't you? Right? Typical disappointment of a father versus, I get that you don't see the world the way I see it. And there's things that you do that I don't agree with, right? But there's things that you're capable of that I just can't do. And now I know how we fit together,
Yeah.
right?
Dude, this
It's,
is so, I mean, I've thought about this before and I felt like I knew the answer that you just told me, but it's something I've wanted to ask because, of course, I do understand. I knew from the beginning that genetics, they are what they are, but I didn't know if the expression of some aspect of them might come on later. But basically, I hear what you're saying. You're born with it, you'll die with it. That part's the same. So it is about the nurturing and the supporting. And I can't help but think about my own kids and how often, I beat my head against the wall, not trying to get them to do a particular thing. But what I recognize now is that very often I supported them the same way, even though they were two very different people.
yeah, yeah,
And I could see the difference. I mean, many of the differences were obvious. They're boys, they're 2 years apart, but they couldn't be farther apart, like personality wise.
right.
One's very chill and low key, and the other one's very high strung and has more anxiety. And I wish I had been armed with more information, back when they were kids. They're both like 30 years old now. So, I mean, not that it's not having the information even now would still be helpful because, of course, I want to always be evolving my relationship with my kids. Maybe we should just start beginning like every relationship we ever have, even friendship. We just go ahead and get people to take
Yeah,
the DNA company test, and that way we know who. You know how many companies I can tell you how many times, like even as a consultant, which is what I am mostly, I'll take whatever test that company likes for
hmm,
determining personality traits or certain work habits or life habits, whatever it might be. And mine always tend towards a certain way, but it would be very interesting almost to say that everybody that comes in the test into the company, you just give them a DNA
yeah.
test, and that way you know what tendencies they're going to have.
You know what job they're wired for, how
Yeah,
they're going to work with different people on the team, who should actually work together, who shouldn't, where the
yeah,
frustration is going to come from, how do you turn a kryptonite into a superpower, like truly,
yeah.
right? All of that stuff. So
The
I'm
question
with you.
should never be what is wrong with you. Like you should never. Of course, that's a terribly damaging question to ask to your kids, even though probably every parent has said it at least once. Usually it's situational. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, what were you thinking? Kind of a thing. But armed with this information, you kind of know in advance what they're thinking and why. So it makes it, if not easier, it makes it more logical.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where, coming back to you, I saw your brain, right, on paper. And I was like, well, no wonder. Because like you said, I didn't know you that well. And all I was told is addiction, superpower, marathon runner. I was like, wow, okay, there's something going on there. But I came into it with the frame of addiction because that's what I was told. But I look at your stuff and I was like, there's no addiction here.
Oh,
But there is this binging propensity. And like, let me just talk to the guy and see. And that's what it was, right? So we
yeah.
can't solve you can't solve a problem at the symptom level and be right 100% of the time. It's like yeah, yeah,
It's in my, we talked a little about this, but now my brain is really spinning. So I'm starting to do some fairly high level coaching with folks, certain type of folks. And I think armed with some of this information, some of them are people struggling with addiction or alcoholism. Some are just people trying to find their way. And a lot of them have made a lot of money and they're incredibly unhappy, which is such a common, thing. We all think that having a huge fat bank account is going to eliminate our are issues. And if you really dive even into the genetics, there's nowhere on there that says, if you have X amount of money in the bank, that suddenly this genetic trait is no longer going to be driving you. Uh,
Exactly.
but
Different content.
yeah, I think this could really be. I mean, I'm excited about having some of my clients do this so that so I understand them better, but obviously so that they understand themselves better. Because I think the other thing people do, me included, I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of embarrassment. I felt certain things about my behavior. So my genetics do not excuse my behavior, but it certainly does make it easier, especially with my propensity to binge, not just in drugs and alcohol, but I mean, even my propensity to binge in running or in, it doesn't matter what it is. Only age has kind of slowed down my uh, desire to continue to feed the machine. There's always something new every week or every month, or now I'm off chasing this idea or that adventure. And understanding from you, from the results of my test, and then also getting a little bit of extra seasoning at 60 years old now, is allowing me to recognize how I'm responding to something,
Yeah.
and take my time, slow my roll just a little bit, and let that idea. I call it trying on pants. So I'll let that idea sit, whatever it is, and I'll try it on for a couple of days or weeks or months or whatever, and it reveals itself as being a genuine thing that I want to pursue, or something that was just like something that hit that place in my brain that got me all fired up for a minute. And I think that's learning how to not control it, but just to recognize it has been an important process for me.
So something you said there just made a light bulb go off in my head
Hmm.
about you as an individual. Do you mind? I've never done this before. Can I look at your DNA report right now while we're recording?
Of course.
Yeah, there's something I just thought of after what you just said. And let me just check if what I'm saying is, because what you just said is that with age, this feeling declined a little bit, right?
Yes.
And with neurochemicals, unless you have a gut issue or an
Yeah.
inflammatory issue, there isn't much of a change.
Hmm.
But hormones change. How old are you
Hmm.
now, Charlie?
I just turned 60 not that long ago.
And when did you feel that this change happened? It's not as aggressive.
Okay, I'll even make it a little more specific. About 5 years ago, I also changed a couple of other things, which were, for the very first time in my life, I prioritized sleep above everything else. And so I made a decision that, just like I did with addiction, I'm also vegan. So just like I did when I became vegan, yeah, I would say, okay, I'm going to do this behavior for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, whatever it is, and I'm going to see how things change for me when I
Yeah.
do that. So about 5 years ago, I said, because I was one of those people who, we all think we're special, right? So in my mind tells me that I function at a higher level than other people on less sleep. It's just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, athletically, that may be slightly true, and I even think that's related to my sort of addict or my binging nature, because I do really well in races where you're sleep deprived and maybe you're going 3 or 4 days without much sleep or any sleep. I do really well in those. There's something about the way I'm built that I rise to that occasion, because it is just like another binge, right? I mean, that's probably, as I'm saying this, that's probably the reason. But I changed my sleep habits. I prioritized hydration in a huge way. Like, I actually just said, I'm going to sleep better and I'm going to drink better.
Hmm.
The right fluids, the right amount of fluids, the at the right times of day. Like, I'm just going to see how this changes things for me. And that's really when it started to happen. And I recognize that my nature is to always hear, whether it's a new business idea, it doesn't matter what it is, man. New business idea, or somebody says, I'm going to swim the entire Mississippi River. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that too. Like, it doesn't matter what the idea is. Like, I have this thing in me that makes me want to dive. And my wife has heard so many harebrained, crazy ideas through the years. And she even has noticed in recent years that I complete more things, and I start fewer things, but I complete more things, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Makes sense. So now the aha, now you give me a second aha moment. So we're going to look at two things now in your genome. Why you recover so quickly? So the thing that I was thinking. So you said that your this feeling of like go 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 got a little bit more subtle as you aged, and so we have this unique phenomenon where our body gives us what we need, right? And when you sort of lean forward into something in like warrior state, your body starts to produce more testosterone. You get more androgenized. And the more testosterone gives you more of a warrior state. And the war of a warrior state gives you more testosterone. You go in this vicious cycle forward. And somebody like you who's stuck in a binging state can extend that so far that no wonder you can get to 31 hours,
Mm.
because those two things are, it's like they keep stepping in front of each other and pulling you forward, right? The same thing is true of leaning back and like, I'm not going to do it. You get more estrogenized and your body goes in a vicious circle backwards, right? So if you decide to like relax, you might binge on your relaxation because it kind of goes backwards, right? But so what I see here in your hormones, funny thing is that you are making a lot of testosterone,
Hmm.
right? You're really fast in what's called a CYP17A1 gene. I'm just peeking at it. And
Yeah.
so you are much more likely when you get into that warrior state, there's just a lot of testosterone there.
Yeah.
And so this feeling of, and this is why as you aged, it changed a little bit because you get into your 50s and that testosterone starts to drop.
So what role though does emotion play in that? And I'm just curious. So what if I'm understanding the way you're saying it, I have a propensity towards this behavior based on what you see. But obviously the one thing that the intangible is, it's not always just from getting older. I mean, I'm 60, but you're seeing my test, which was just like a year ago. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago. And so I am still that way. Even going all the way back to we didn't even get to this, but like, as you know, I ran across the Sahara Desert. That was probably the adventure I'm best known for. And I
Right.
ran 2 marathons every day for 111 days in a row
Oh,
across across the world's biggest desert. And so interestingly about what you're saying right now is, so I averaged about 5 hours of sleep for the 111 days. So I was clearly overtaxed physically,
yeah.
under rested chronically. I mean, and yet strangely every single day, and I'm not saying I woke up excited every day. Most days I woke up, my eyes popped open, it was like, oh no, here we
Yeah.
go again. But there is this thing in me, this drive that tells me that, going back to the beginning of our conversation, that's why I don't ever think that much about preparation. I'm not saying I don't prepare. I train, I make a logistics plan, just like a business plan, like whatever adventure I'm doing. But once I've made the plan, I let go of it. Like I let go of trying to fine tune every detail, because
Yeah.
once you start an adventure, everything you can think of is going to go wrong. So no matter what plans you've made, it really is going to be about how you choose to adapt to
Hmm.
what's happening, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's intangible things like a support vehicle blowing up, or people quitting that are helping you, or it rains, or it's 100 degrees, or what. Like, there's just so many things you can't control no matter how you make the plan. But the part of me that doesn't change, that didn't change, and that never changes is when things go wrong, I actually get very excited. Like I get there's a I want that moment when I don't think I can possibly go on. Like I don't
Yeah.
even if even if it's just in running 100 miles or something. I actually want to reach that place where there's no way I can continue, and then I find a way to continue, because it's my view that in life, like those are actually the only moments we end up remembering. We imprint with the things that are really, really difficult, and sometimes those are, the death of a loved one, or the loss of a relationship, or a job you didn't get, or maybe one you did get, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like those things are the moments that we actually carry with us. So avoiding hardship, not only is it pointless, it's actually maybe even harmful, because without those hardships, you don't get to become the person you are. What I never accounted for, though, even though I knew it, because I read, and I mean I'm not a dumb person. I just never accounted for how the genetics I was born with, how fundamentally important they are in every decision that I actually make. I mean, they are.
So what you just said, aha moment number 3, and I didn't tell you number 2 yet. So and I just looked to confirm these. So number 2, your recovery and why you could get up and go after 5 hours and why you're able to keep going for 111 days. Your mitochondrial function is awesome. So your cell's ability to just fight off inflammation and oxidation. So that kind of activity would normally destroy someone after a few days. Like they need a week to recover. Your body is recovering just as fast as you're abusing it. You have really great mitochondrial function. And you have this really, really rare trait where your arterial structure, your endothelium, as we call it, the inner lining of the blood vessel, you have the best possible quality, which we
Hmm.
very rarely see. Very rarely.
Hmm.
I would say the majority of people. So there's 6 locations we look at on this gene for a variation, and most people, usually half of those locations, they have the bad version, which is why cardiovascular disease is such a big problem, right? You have 0 bad versions out of the 6. Like we the tens of thousands of people we dealt with, there's maybe a handful that have that,
Nice.
which
Huh.
yeah, it is nice, yeah.
Yeah.
But it speaks of that recovery, like your body just doesn't get inflamed and it just keeps going. Now, the thing you just said, you just described how people perceive things, but you were just describing how you perceive things, thinking that that's how everybody does it, and you use the word imprint, right? It's funny you use that word because you literally have a deletion in a gene which causes you to imprint negative and emotional stimulus more than normal people. So when it
Huh.
comes to that car blowing up or that whatever, like you said, I like when that happens because I
Yeah.
learn from it and apply it next time. Your brain actually genetically does that. It takes the emotion, the feeling, the problem, imprints it, like truly imprints it, and then you use that in your recall. So you remember what it felt like truly, right? And you are uniquely doing this. And I'm not saying that not this is not as rare as the cardiovascular thing. It's more common, but it's not everybody, right? So, but you are much more likely to imprint and recall negative stimulus.
What I find so interesting about that too is I tell people all the time, from the stage or in writing or whatever, I love to, I used to make a joke out of it because I try to lighten it up. I ask the audience, like, how many of you hate running? And,
Yeah.
if it's a non-run, if I'm not speaking to a running group, it's like 90% of the hands go up. And
Yeah.
I'll tell a couple of funny jokes about, oh, so, you hate fresh air, and you hate birds, and you hate, like, and they don't really
Yeah.
hate those things. They think they hate how running makes them feel. But what I like to explain to people, it doesn't have to be running, it can be anything. But what I like to explain to people is what you just said, because when I continue to do these hard events, up until right now, partly because every time I do another one and I get past those hard times in that event, those things I do carry forward in my business life because look, I'm an entrepreneur too. And like I'm an entrepreneur with a low threshold of attention. Therefore, I've had a lot of failures.
Yeah.
And so, but the point is that I've learned the more often I put myself within a controllable situation, like a marathon or a triathlon or a hike on the Appalachian Trail, whatever it is, the more often I put myself in that position, the more capable I am of pushing through hard times in my marriage, in my
Right.
businesses, in my other relationships, because you know, in a marathon, I know what to do. Like, even if my body is telling me to, like, hey, we're done, like this, I can't go any farther. I know that it's calories. I know that it's hydration. And I know that maybe I need to do those two things. And maybe I need to slow down and walk for a few minutes. And I actually know that if I do those things, my pain will go from a 10, maybe
Yeah.
just to an 8. But that 8 is a huge difference when you're at a 10
Yeah.
instead of just quitting, because very often people will like, because they think how they feel in that moment is going to project forward forever.
Right.
So like if they feel lousy at mile 16 of a marathon, all they can think is, shit, I got 10 more miles and it's going to feel just like this. I can't do
Yeah.
it. And it's not the case. Like if they can just focus for a few minutes and drink, 3 cups of something, hopefully that's not Gatorade, and and walk a little bit and maybe eat a few calories, they'll actually feel better. And that metaphor works for your relationships, for your business, and obviously again back to what we're talking about. The more I can understand about my own nature and how I'm sort of programmed, then the better it helps me, I think, be equipped to handle any situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Try Pectosol modified citrus pectin today and see for yourself how it can help you manage healthy inflammation levels to support your detox and weight loss goals. Listeners get 20% off with code UNPILL20 at ecoeugenics.link/unpill. That's ECONUGENICS.link/unpilled.
This is awesome. I mean, because there aren't many people like you walking this planet that have done the types of things that you've done, and to be able to speak to you while I have your genetic report open and hear all the
Great.
things that are, yeah,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
like, yeah, this is how you build a superhuman, you know. So what's coming in the future? Maybe cloning Charlie Engle. I don't know, but
Maybe just my vascular, maybe just my ability to fight inflammation. We can clone that part. So
yeah. Oh man, that's
yeah.
awesome. So now, what are you working on now? Like you just did this
Yeah.
31 day. First of all, the 31-hour run. What is that? Were you literally running for 31 hours
Yeah.
straight?
Yeah. I was going slow and I did plenty of walking, but I got about 100 miles. And the hardest part of this event, and I do it every year, but every year I get a year more sober. And so, my kids were even making fun of me the other day, and they're like, what happens when you turn 70 and you've got to do 40 hours? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you guys are going to be pushing me in a wheelchair, maybe. But, I did. The hardest part of these events is there were a couple hundred people, so I did 12 hours of talking, which you've spoken to me enough to know that I'm also an excellent talker. I like to talk.
Yeah.
I'm an endurance talker too. I don't know if anybody wants to listen, but I like to talk. But I, I mean, look, I've got a couple of big plans, and the one I probably mentioned to you, but I don't know that you remember. I'm in January of 2025, so about a year and a half, a little less, I will go from the Dead Sea, the lowest place on the planet, to the top of Mount Everest, the highest
Yeah.
point on the planet, human powered. It's taken me years to put together the funding, to bring together a handful of really amazing sponsors that are already on board. Um, and I never look, just like the Sahara, an amazing thing happened out of that. I helped to co-found with Matt Damon the world's largest clean water nonprofit, which is water.org. And
Right.
it came out of this idea that running across the Sahara could have value. I mean, I'm just a dude who wanted to see if I could do it. I'm not some philanthropist or, I like to do good in the world, but I believe that good starts by challenging yourself, and you still have to be finding ways to push your own limits before you can help the world create amazing things, or maybe simultaneously. And so for this journey from the Dead Sea to Mount Everest, which will be human powered, it's taken me a while to figure out the purpose behind it. And it's not to show off athletically, because you know what? You see people's genetic stuff every day. There's a few things about me that maybe are unique, or I've got a couple of gifts. But there's always going to be somebody with more athletic gifts, more whatever. I mean, there's amazing human beings out there that can do harder things than I can do. They can run farther, they can jump higher, whatever. Um, but I want to remind people, with this expedition, of the beauty of this phenomenal place we live.
Mm.
I am, my wife is a very well-known environmental expert and wildlife biologist. And so we do very much, look at the planet in a way where, we're concerned about, you know, how much longer we're going to be able to sustain here. But I don't
Right.
think that it helps to tell stories all the time that are from a negative point of view. And just
Mm.
like what you do with the DNA company, I think it's beautiful. Of course, if you see something troubling, you're going to tell your client, "Hey, I see this." I mean, because
Yeah.
that's part of your job, your role. But you are going to try to, because I know you well enough already, you're going to highlight the positives, and you're going to say, these are the things that you need to build on. I look
Mm.
at what I do as the same thing. Like I'm going to cross the planet. I'm going to do it very publicly, and I'm going to find the beauty everywhere I go. And I'm going to share that with people, and hopefully bring people to this idea that, we as humans are worth saving, and so is the planet we live on. And however we've gotten here, all you have to do is walk out your front door, and you can see the differences between now and 5 years
Yeah.
ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So whatever person's political or whatever beliefs, most people can't deny what's hitting them in the face. So I hope that this journey of mine, which will be filmed, and you know, there's a lot of things that'll be happening with it, even while it's happening, and then we'll cut together a beautiful film afterwards. But I just want to share the beauty of this planet where we live, and my viewpoint of the people who live on it. And I want to hook them. I do what I always do, Cash. I hook them with the idea of adventure, and then I tell them the story that I want them to hear.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. And that's the inspiration we needed, because this is like, you're going to be 62 when this is happening
Yeah,
ish, 60, 61,
yeah,
62. And think about what the average American thinks 62 looks like.
yeah. It's
And,
supposed to
and
be
what,
retirement age.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not joining AARP. The hell with that. I mean, maybe I'll join if I get a discount on something, because I'm kind of cheap sometimes. But no, and to your point, people think, I've been hearing this my whole life, man. I swear, I kid you not. I remember 30-year-olds telling me when I was 25, "Oh, you just wait till you turn 30. It's not going to be easy." And then and then I had 40-year-olds telling me when I was 35, and then 50-year-olds telling me when I'm 40. I mean, I have wear and tear on my body. It's not as easy as it used to be, but I have the mental power and the experience of life in my corner now. So now the things that might have stopped me as a 30 or 40-year-old, mentally don't even touch me now. And I know what to do and how to do it. And I don't think there's any limit to how much longer I can keep doing it.
Yeah. I know we've taken your time. I just want one big thought for you, if you don't mind, is this was your journey, which was, we know your background and how you recovered, and this tool you now use to do amazing things, but also give your brain the reward it needs. Do you think it's sort of physical movement is the right tool for everybody? Like you've been around all these other people, or is it just a sense of finding something to replace it? Is this the way that people deal with abuse, or is there other? Yeah,
No, there is no other way but physical movement. I mean, I am not kidding when I say, and this is the danger. Sometimes people see the things that I do and they think that that's what I advocate for. Like, you actually know my friend Greg, and I'm doing a lot of work in stem cells these days also, and like, he laughs at me because we talk about longevity all the time. And when I'm actually speaking to a client or someone I'm coaching, or maybe I'm going to help them with stem cell, whatever the deal is, they'll say to me, how much are stem cells? And I'm like, they're expensive. Like, it depends on what you do, but we're talking about a lot of money. And I said, let me ask you a question first. How many days a week are you walking or doing some sort of physical exercise? And if their answer is zero, or like, a couple times a week, I know they're probably lying and it's not that much. I basically say, look, man, let me save you a ton of money because if you're looking for longevity and a better life and a happier, more fulfilling life, I mean, overall, and you're not at least walking 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week, we're not talking about running marathons, whatever. Like, if you would just start walking 30 minutes a day, a fast walk, I'm not talking about shopping at the mall. Like, I'm talking
yeah,
about getting after it. You will add 10 years to your life. I'll be honest with you, dude. I'm not a scientist. I have no idea if that's actually true. But my point is, the simplest thing anybody can do to add years to their life, no matter how they're built or what their DNA says. I have not met anyone that couldn't benefit from 30 minutes of exercise 4 or 5 days a week. And I
yeah,
think that the we're meant to move. And so that movement isn't just feeding the physical part of us. For me in particular, we've already established, when I go out for a run, that's where all my best and my worst ideas come from. The
yeah.
point is, my brain is on fire. Like, I'm getting after it, and I've got these ideas. I always carry my phone so that I can do voice recordings, almost like a dream state. And some of my ideas are awful, but it really is about that constant, that blood flow is the only, I'm not a scientist, but the way I look at it is that blood flowing into my brain. I talk even more than I talk now. Like, my wife, I drive her nuts if we talk on the phone while I'm running, because I just can't, like, I can't even get the words out fast enough, because
Wow.
that tells me what's happening physiologically and how it's affecting my brain power and my ability to be creative. So, long answer to your question, but I mean, I think that anybody, you and I both know a lot of the same people in the biohacking world, and with respect to many of them, there's no hack for being out in fresh air,
Yeah,
sunshine on your face, breathe. Just because you can do something shorter and get the same result doesn't mean that it has the same value for you as a human being. There's never going to be a time where I don't want to be out in nature, feel the heat, feel the cold, hear the birds. That part feeds me just as much as the physical movement does. And people who don't experience that maybe can't, I don't know, somehow they can't appreciate it, but um it will always be part of what, I mean, to be honest, I probably wouldn't work with someone who refused to move their body at least a little bit, because I don't think I'd be the right fit for them. um you know and yeah, I mean, you got to.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And you're the whole thing you're doing, where you're healing through movement and nature, and your comment that some people don't feel it, is their body, they're just not ready for it at a conscious level. Like there's every sound, every leaf moving, that's all frequency, and it's all
Yeah.
doing stuff for you. But you yourself have to be in the right state to receive it first. We all have receptors in our mitochondria looking for frequency, but if you're in the wrong state, you're not getting it. And if you look at any of the it's the blue zones where the centenarians come
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
They all walk all the time,
Yeah.
right? And there's a surprise. It's not just like walking on a treadmill. They're in like village type settings where they're walking over stones and things are crooked, so that it's that signaling to the brain, constant brain nerve system connection. Most of your nervous system is in your legs, right? Outside of your brain and all that, the majority of it is there. So that signaling, that movement. I remember just reading that the best antidepressant we have on the market today works 40% of the time. And there was
Yeah.
a study that was just published that walking works twice as well as the best antidepressant. Right?
Yeah.
I should say exercise in general, exercise, right?
Yeah.
Consistent exercise.
I know I was going to say one more thing too, and that is during COVID, and I think a lot of people this happened to, but I started doing, I got really serious about breath work was the other thing that I really added to my repertoire. And it won't surprise you, I don't think, with my brain, I'm the worst meditator you've ever met. Like and I mean, I'm even partners with Deepak Chopra in a business around addiction recovery, or just a nonprofit, piece of the Chopra Foundation. And hard as I tried, you sit me in a chair and try to get me to do breathing exercises on my own and meditate, and I'm making grocery lists and having arguments with my father in my head, and like I can't do it. But the minute I started doing guided breath work, especially holotropic breath work with music, everything changed.
Yeah.
And I do it every single day now, and I believe in the power also of, not so physical movement. I include breath work in that movement, because you are expanding, your lungs, you're doing breath holds, you're really doing this very vigorous exercise quite often. And it's really changed, it's changed the way I feel in general. Like, I thought as a runner that I just already knew everything I needed to know about breathing, and
Yeah.
once I really got serious about it, it made a big difference for me.
Yeah. Anyone that dives into it feels better. It's one of those blanket things, like you got to sleep better. Breath work's going to help you. There's
Yeah,
nobody says that breath work sucks, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is, I mean, awesome. So the peek into your story and you opening up and telling us, what you went through and being transparent is it's awesome, because people get to see the potential of, human will and what's possible, and nobody's stuck. It's a context problem. It's a habit problem. You can get unstuck. You've been unstuck for 31 years doing amazing things now. The 31-hour run thing, that's still scary to me even think about it. But anyways, you did it, which is great. Congratulations.
well, guess what? Next year you're invited to 32, and you have a whole year to get ready, right? So you can,
I'm trying to work on 32 minutes right now.
that's
So
all. Well, and actually, that's what happens. A lot of people will come for 32 minutes, or they'll do 32 miles, or they'll do 3.2 miles. Or, what I tell people is I'm honoring
yeah,
just on one final serious note, I'm honoring what's important to me, but I want people to come and honor what's important to them. It might be sobriety. It could be anything. There's a lot of people who don't survive addiction. I'm sure everybody knows someone who didn't make it,
yeah,
who died of alcoholism or drug overdose or whatever. And we all have family and friends and coworkers. And the one thing that I mean, I know we need to finish here, but something that just occurred to me, and I think that what you disclose at the DNA company, and what as a human being, what you disclose, it's about revealing strengths. I don't want to call them weaknesses, but I would call them vulnerabilities, would be a better word.
hmm
And my role is very similar. My job, especially when it comes to like addiction and talking about it, is to be vulnerable about it, to talk about some of the things I went through, but also recognize that even after 31 years, I still got shit going on, right? I mean, it's not like my life is easy and perfect just because I don't drink and do drugs. And now without the drinking and drugs, I actually have to be fully present for everything. I can't hide. And I think it's really, I think some people worry that, I know you've heard this a million times, they worry if they do like a DNA panel, they're going to learn things that they don't want to know. And I don't know. I've never seen it that way. My view is, information is just power. And the more you know about yourself and your vulnerabilities, and even sharing those with other people, reminds all of us that we're kind of in this together. And, I am only as good as my community. 250 people came out just to hang out, during a sober run on a really hot day in Maryland. And that has very little to do with anything other than the power of fellowship and community. And that's why we do it.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for adding that 2 minutes. I'm going to clip a part of that out and make it our next TV commercial.
Good. Yeah, do it, man. I'm on your team. I mean, I know we have a lot more to talk about too, but I'm really thanks for reminding me of some of the results of my own test. And we need to keep moving that ball forward. I know there's huge value in that, and I think about all the people I work with and the value that I know they could get out of understanding these things about themselves.
Amazing. Thank you, Charlie. This was awesome. Thank you again for being open and sharing your story, and people knowing what's possible. You're an incredible human being. We're lucky that we got you here today. Thank you for making the time, and we'll see you again.
My pleasure, brother. Anytime. I'll see you down the road.